What's up, gang? Welcome to Room and Board. My name is Chris George, and today we are taking a look at the insert for Massive Darkness 2. I made an insert. I did. It's something that I've discovered that I quite enjoy doing. And if you haven't checked out my how to build the perfect insert on a budget, or whatever it's called, I'll link to that in the description as well. But I spent I don't know how long, quite a long time mapping this out in order to get all of these boxes into this one box. I didn't succeed, but I did succeed in at least getting rid of these 4 boxes. And there was another box that contained a heck of a lot of cards, just thick stacks on stacks, basically updating everything from Massive Darkness 1 to make it compatible with Massive Darkness 2. So if you got the Kickstarter, you also got this as well. And so I, of course, made sure that was fitting into this main box because, you know what? They're just cards with abilities, and you don't need to have a specific minifigure to use them. You just need to have the cards. So now I have all of that variability into this one box, which is very exciting. It might have been the best part about the Kickstarter. So if you have gotten the Kickstarter, this is just the regular Kickstarter version. This was the base pledge. I didn't do anything more than that. Hopefully this might give you a jumping off point to make this accessible. I'm very proud of this insert because I believe it's going to go a long way in helping me get this game to the table. And my goal, whenever I make inserts, my goal is to make sure that the full experience is playable with just one box. Because I often travel. I travel to friends' houses, and if I want to bring a game and we want to play it, I don't want to have to take up room in my board game bag with everything, right? Oh, what are we playing today? Half of Massive Darkness because that's all I could fit? No, I want to be able to give the option of Massive Darkness and then the option of Ankh and the option of Townsfolk Tussle and all of these sort of big box games that maybe I want to get to the table and let my friends or the mood of the evening decide on what we'll play. Anyway, that's enough of that. That was my goal. My goal was to make sure that this was completely playable in one box, and I have done that in a way that I feel will be very efficient to set up and to play, and that way you leave anything you don't need in the box. Although with this game, it's tough because you don't really leave a lot. You kind of need to take everything out to play, which is just part of the game. But I've minimized it to whatever we can. So that's enough of that. Let's go to the top down and I'll keep talking. If you don't own Massive Darkness or you own more Massive Darkness, well, may God have mercy on your soul because these boxes are jam-packed with stuff and figures. Hopefully this video can exist as another example of what you can do and the ways of thinking about building things so that it works for your games and your space and your gaming goals. So let's switch to the top down and let's go through it because I'm very excited to show it off. Basically, I only did stuff with this and I did nothing with this. Really nothing. I just took things from it and put it in here as well and then left half of it, and yeah, we'll get to it. You'll see. All right. So if you haven't played Massive Darkness, the main consideration that I was making when making this insert, oh, here we go. This is a big old box. Is that all the mobs, the monsters are referred to as mobs. All of the mobs, oh, how pathetic is that? It should have been up for you to see in perfect order. All of the mobs generally have to be always accessible because there's a different sculpt for each mob and you don't know which mob's going to come out. So anyway, we always have the rulebook at the top. I don't always do this. When I know a game really well, this rulebook will then live at the bottom of the box so that you don't have to worry about taking something out every time you pull it out. Then over here, we have this one dashboard that couldn't fit. All the other sort of character stuff is along this side, but this couldn't fit because there would have been too much box lid lift, and I wanted to make sure that there was enough width here. So I just made a little indentation for this this bar dashboard and these additional kind of boss mats that you'll use only in specific scenarios. So what I did was, if you look, there's this, I do this in a lot of inserts that I make. There's a little indentation here because all you need is that one little indentation, and so the rest of the insert can be a little bit higher, but then you have that indentation for where your stuff needs to go, and then you just put things that will fit in that area. This is just a round tracker, so that always should stay up at the top. I'm not super happy with loose things. I like everything having its place, but this is the best solution that I came up with. Now, on the top, you then have 2 stacks of your cards, your little treasure cards here. These contain all of your rare treasures, your starting items, your common treasures, and your epic treasures. What's a little unfortunate with this is that if you bundle the common and the starting together, and then the rare and the epic together, there's just a tiny little bit of lid lift here. So I sacrificed a millisecond or a few seconds of setup time, of setup ease, by divvying out a few rare treasure cards. You'll see if I pull that off, there's like just a tiny bit. It's nothing you really need to be concerned about. I just would like it to be have worked out completely exactly the way I wanted it to, but it didn't. So that's why those are there. Anyway, those fit on top of the roaming monster cards, which we'll get into in a second. Next, we have this little tray that was made. And it wasn't made by me. This is the only part of the Come On insert that remains. And it used to house 2 separate things here, but I just chopped it out, and you'll see I taped it together a bit. I hope that wasn't out of focus, sorry. I talk about this in my insert videos as well. This is what I like to refer to as using the parts of the insert that work for you. I could have made this base and added walls, but you know what? That takes time, and I would much rather just chop things off and stick in a couple things to fix it rather than make a full base and measure out the size of it. I kind of knew the size, and this is the size that I wanted. So I just hacked off the part until it worked, and then cut out the middle and added some extra walls, and this houses your mana and your health and the dice, which that's pretty much what you want to be able to pass out to the players anyway. They're gonna need their dice and that sort of stuff. Next, I made this big token tray. And what I had done prior to this, I'll show you the measurements as we go along so that it's helpful to those of you who want to make your own. This one clocks in at around 10.5 by 9 3/4. Or 25 centimeters. I deal in centimeters, so it's just what's right to you. But I know people asked for the measurements in the last time I did one of these, so I'll make sure I have that for you right now. And this height on this first one is about 1 inch. The proportions on this bottom one, as you can see underneath, there's another tray, and these contain all the mobs, and these contain the mobs and this little token area. How you make this token area is, you know what, you cut out the bottom part. The bottom is just cardboard. I find I'm doing this more and more. You just need cardboard as a base. You don't ever need foam core as a base. I'd like to tip this on its side, but it's likely everything's going to go everywhere, so I can't. You don't need everything foam core as a base. It may look prettier, but you know what? I'm happy with my chicken fingers that are on the bottom of this box because it saves you that space. And with something like this where the box is so jam-packed, you can't afford to lose that vertical space. So these are all the tokens you need. I just assorted them in a way that makes sense to me. You can assort them however you like. And what I did when I measured this is you basically put down all your figures, say, okay, that's around the space it needs, and then you put in a wall. And you just do it over and over and over again until you have these specific component sections. Now, the reason why I wanted to have these two as their own separate removable bins is, like I said, and ideally I'm going to paint this because these are kind of mashed together. I guess I can go through in terms of what is where. These are the fallen angels. These are the goblins. These are your little gargoyles. These are some harpy figures that came with the Fey Folk expansion. These are the satyrs from the main game. These are little mini cupids that came with the Rainbow Crossing expansion. These are your elementals. These are your demons that are in the base game. And I think that's it. Yeah, that's all you see. And the height on this one, for those of you who are interested, is 1.5 inches. So this one's a little bit bigger. And again, how you determine the height is you just take the base and you lay them flat. And then what I do is I kind of would take a ruler. I would take something like this and I would just slide it across the top and see if it picks on anything, right? It's kind of catching on the insert right now. But I just see if it picks on anything and if any bits are sticking up, and that's how you know if your minis are going to be safe. Anyway, the reason it has to be like this is because both of these trays, actually all 3 of these trays, are going to be out on the table at all times because you're constantly going to be reaching in for tokens. And then whenever a new monster comes up, if you have the figure or the sculpt for it, which you generally will, unless you have the extra Kickstarter content that you've mixed in, and you don't have the figures associated with it, you're going to be then pulling out that figure. So I wanted this to just be in one easy section, and I contemplated making these a separate section to be able to pass out, but I didn't for 2 reasons. Because one, then you'd need walls on both sides, so it's a little bit more of an economy of space if you do it this way. And then 2, it's just another step to pull out. If you can just have these 2 giant things, sure, they sit off to the side. They can sit on top of the box if you are looking for space saving ideas. Now next, we have the tiles. These are the map tiles. These will be according to the specific scenario that you pick. And this is actually why the rulebook can't be on the bottom, because that has the scenarios in it. So you're gonna look at a scenario, you're gonna set this up. Wham bam, thank you ma'am. Those are all your boards. These actually could go on top if you felt like you wanted to pull these out first. I have them in second because I kind of feel like you'd get all your stuff sorted, then you'd pick a scenario, and then once you pick your scenario, you'll pull these out. Now in here I have another separate little box that fits in. This had to be made just based upon how much space you still have from the boards. That's what I use to measure it. And so this one is housing the Nagas, or the sea serpents, and the imps from the Fey Folk expansion. And it is 9.25 inches-ish, 9 1/8, closer to that, by 2.5, in between 2.5 and 2 1/8, so 2 5 9/16. Yeah, 2 9/16 ish. And then the height for that one is around 2 1/8 for that height. And these guys, the reason why they're in here is because they are a little thick. They're a little wobbly, and they got weird kind of dangly pieces. So I was going to put the angels in here. This container was a little bit too short for the angels to reside in them. You could probably get the angels in it if you made it a little bit higher, because you will have a little bit of extra space on top. If you are using this, there will be a little bit more space. So you could potentially get the angels in there. I chose not to because I was building this basically from the ground up and just fudging it as I went. I'd build a layer and then say, okay, what next? How else can I do this? Now here on the side, as you've seen, we have all the additional character dashboards. There's just a few that are flopping here and there. And down here, this is something that I
think is an absolute must if you are creating your own insert, I added in, there are 10 different character classes. So my question here was, how do I make it interesting for people to be able to randomize what characters they get versus should I have all the characters the same? Each character class has their own little mini game, so they all have their own dashboards and new rules and things that matter. And then in addition to that, there are different sculpts for each character class. There are different characters you can choose who have a different base ability. And so I went back and forth on this, but what matters to me the most is that I can hand somebody their stuff and they have all the things that they need. That's what I like being able to do with a storage solution. You pass it to someone, you say, this is your stuff, set it up in your own little area. And so what I opted on, you'll see there is a little section for this deck box, and I just purchased one of these deck boxes. I had a spare. In here are all the cards for the mobs. The mobs can spawn, and that'll be how you know what villain you're facing and which sculpt you're supposed to pull out. You'll see there are a ton of cards in here. This isn't just for the base game. This is, like I said, all of the Kickstarter content from the first game. I'll just pull this out. So my thought with this is that in addition to all these mobs, you have these mobs and some door cards for when you open doors, and this is incredibly out of order. Oh, you know why it's out of order? Because I hadn't decided if I was going to include the cards that I don't actually have sculpts for or not. If I don't, then you're just left with these. But I think I am going to include them. With each class, there come these cards that say, oh, this is your Shadowbane form. So if you manage to pick up 2 sets of an epic quest, you then get to activate a special ability. So these will always go with your class, but what I'm going to use them as are as class randomizers. So if you want to be a specific class, sure, you just take that class, whatever. But if you don't want to be a specific class, then you just shuffle them up and you say, boom, all right, you're the wizard. And then you go and you get the wizard stuff out. What I haven't done yet is written a little label on each one of these. I think I'm going to, because, or you can just organize them alphabetically, you know which one goes where, right? But if you want to be the wizard, I want to be able to say, okay, I know the wizard is somewhere. Let's see if I can pull it out in the first try. I'm kind of cheating here. I'm buying time looking for the sculpts that I know are the wizard sculpts. It's over here. Yeah, wizard's here. You can say, boom, there's the wizard. And then you have their own little sculpts in here. And so what I found actually worked out well is you can see there are 3 sculpts in here, and each class's individual set of cards. And then each class has its own character cards. Once you've chosen, yeah, I want to be the wizard, you pull out these cards, and you choose randomly, or whichever one looks coolest, which wizard you want to be. And then you can take that specific sculpt. Boom. Take that and then leave everything else that you don't need in its own little box. I feel like on a game that has such a table space problem, almost so to speak, this sort of thing is necessary. The ability to put things back that you aren't using for that particular session. You can see it's a bit of a tight fit. It's harder for me to get it in when I am not looking. That doesn't help. I'm not looking to try to get it for the camera. Make sure no bits are hanging out. You can slide them in. So that's what I ended up deciding on. And what's great is that most of these ended up being the same size. So this is like 2.5, no, it's the size of a card, basically. That's the exact size that you need, plus you need to make sure to account for the 5 millimeters of 5 inches, that would be a lot, 5 millimeters of foam core that you have on the sides here when you're making your base. Yeah, see, Jane's chicken strips. You see things are slightly overhanging on the base, whatever. But the base is like 1.5 inches by whatever the card length is, 4 inches, right? And then the height is again whatever the card length is, because you don't really have to account for that cardboard on the bottom. So it is just over 2 inches. Again, we're getting that 2 5/8. Yeah, I think the other one was a 5/8 and not a 9/16, but so many of them actually fit into that section. Even the Rogue, which I was surprised about. You can tell this one is the Rogue because it's got the Rogue's bag in there that I've just kind of stuffed in on the top, and all the little tokens on the side that I bundled in, because the Rogue, their mini game is that they're just a bag builder. I was really surprised the Rogue was able to fit. The only ones that were different were the Shaman, because you get your additional spirits. And so I wanted to make sure that there were the room for the spirits that you get to summon. And then I just throw all the tokens in as well. Oh, speaking of tokens, haha, I'd forgotten to put the Barbarian's little token in, or the Berserker's little token. So now it's in there. Yeah, so I have the Shaman, which is a bit larger. And then I also had the Monk, which was slightly larger. I honestly don't think the Monk needed to be this large, but the Monk has a bunch of different chakra tokens, and they have a lot more cards. So I wanted to make sure I accounted for those cards, and so I made an extra large box for them, but they could have been a little bit smaller, honestly. And then the Tinkerer, because in the Kickstarter, if you've gotten it, oh, you see it's a tight fit. In the Tinkerer, they have all of their different sentries and little units that they can make. So the Tinkerers, basically, again, how I did this is you just lay out a strip, or you see how much room is left, and you throw some people in and make sure that they all fit, and then you put the walls around it, right? Like, I'm not very crafty. I just kind of make it up as I go along. So the Tinkerer is about 3 and a 7, 3 and 0.75, almost 4 on the bottom. Yeah, almost 4 on the bottom, 3.75. So it's kind of like that square, and you just kind of fudge it. And then you shove it in. I guess I'll give you the width on the Paladin box. That's just a little over 2 inches, 2 1/4, and 2 1/4, 2 1/8 for the Druid and the Monk boxes, rather. But again, I wouldn't necessarily recommend just following these measurements without double checking the first couple times, because you don't know how you're going to want your stuff to land. There might be just a little bit extra space. You can see on a lot of these that I've just taken an X-Acto knife and hacked off where it's a bit too tall. And honestly, feeling this feels a bit too tall, and I may take an X-Acto knife to it so we get a little bit squished down. Although that shouldn't matter too much, because this deck box, unfortunately, is a little bit taller than all of my bins, so it's going to rest on the deck box and not anywhere else. So your bins could technically be a little bit higher to match this height if you are using a deck box like me. You don't have to. You can just put your cards in a stack there too, which works, which I've been doing for all the other types of cards. But I'm just getting these together. Let's see if it works. Those slide in, and honestly, oof, you know what? I may change it to do that and just wrap an elastic around them, because that might give me a little bit of extra space up top where I can add in another rule book. I just like having that I had this on hand, and so I was using it, but you really don't need to. So that's an interesting choice that I'm going to have to make. For our purposes, to see if it affects anything, let's just call it like that. Because we're all about making it budget friendly, and why go out and get a deck box if you don't have to? Now, we're almost done. We're almost through this box. I'll tilt it a little bit. Oh, I can't, because it's still very heavy. I have a few more things that I want to talk about. Here on this side, I have the Tinkerer also has these additional exosuit armor that they can put on instead of their equipment. So I have that down here. These are just a couple additional map tiles that are a little high if they aren't just tucked in. So I kind of tucked them in a little bit there. on the side. And then you'll see on this map tile, not this map tile, oh, the Necromancer's down there too. I have the first portion of the wizard's wheel, and his other portion is in his box, actually. Now these are just your standard equipment holders, and they're great. I am very happy that they exist and that they are given to you. In the unboxing, I said, I don't know if you need them. And then I take that back 100%. You absolutely do. And the real discovery was finding out that they do stand upright. Oh, God. They do stand upright pretty fine. Right here. That's also a good way of putting it away, is that don't ever go from this side because it's going to catch on stuff that you likely are leaving in the boxes and not using unless you're using that specific character class. You just push from the outside, kind of bend and kind of push in. So I have your character boards there, easily accessible, that you can pull out depending on the number of players. Here, I have an enormous amount of roaming monsters, and you'll see they're in 2 packages here because this is the amount that you get in the base game. And then this is the amount that you get when you have, this is the base pledge. This is for what you all have figures and sculpts for. And then this is the amount that it comes updated from likely the full all-in pledge of the main first game. And I wasn't sure if I was going to include it. I wasn't sure if these were going to fit, honestly, because I used to have the other cards over there and then had the smaller cards along this side. But I squeezed it in because my friends wanted me to, and they wanted the variability. So it's going to be in, and I can combine these two. And then what I'm kind of happy with, and what you may not enjoy about this solution, because I know some people are very touchy about this, and I am too, honestly. If you paint your main boss figures, you may end up wanting to leave them in their own containers. This is a delicate touch because I could have put them in a little bit more, but I'm leaving this guy's tail out for now. Although I guess I could just turn him around and probably have the same effect and be safer, but I'm leaving his tail out for now because the mob items, these little cards, fit perfectly, and there's just a tiny little spot where a tail can rest, and so I'm leaving them there. These figures are all kind of, they're not thrown in together. They certainly are not. They're placed gently in a very specific way that I'll take out as I'm talking so you can see. But these are not all of the figures that you need. There are 2 giant figures that come in this base box that I ended up putting in the other box for storage. And my reasoning for this is that, again, if you are going to be substituting things, you have just a bunch of angels here, basically. Here, I'll pull them out and show which ones go in where for your own. This is by no means the most efficient way. It's just the way that I ended up packaging them in a way that makes sense. If you're going to be substituting things anyway, and these are the big roaming monsters that appear, they're one-offs, right? And if I'm going to be using all of these cards, I'm going to be substituting monsters and I may not have them. Why am I worrying about getting the big figures in? If I want the big figures, I'll take the 2 boxes. That's fine. But if I want to have the most compact version of this game possible, still with an ample variety of figures, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 figures in this box. There's Queen Canendra down there. Now to put them back in, that's the test. You just kind of go with the vertical height, making sure you're not crushing anything. And I think I would put them in this way, painted. Often I don't like seeing things kind of crumpled together as I describe them because I feel like they're going to get damaged, and the paint job that you spend so much time doing is not going to be successful. So I wanted to make sure there was enough, an ample amount of room that if I painted them and put them in, the stuff wouldn't get that damaged. I know sometimes watching people's storage systems like this, it gives me a bit of a heart attack. But know that I am as gentle as I can and being as precious as I can while also maintaining space. So this is the only kind of concession that you're making because you are missing a couple figures from that main box that the base game generally gives you. Anyway, sorry, I just checked my camera and it looks like I'm kind of getting a little bit of feedback. Hopefully I can edit that out in post. I'm sorry if there has been some feedback right now, but that's what we get on a budget. Yeah, and then putting it away, it's pretty easy. You put your stuff back in. You put your cards, they're all together. You put away your boards, they go back. You take your map tiles, and the other map tiles can just be resting there as you play the game as well, right? You determine what you are, you determine what you want, and then you leave the map tiles there. These both back in. These are going in at the same time, by the way. 1, 2, easy peasy. This little bin goes in. I missed a card, so that's staying out. I missed putting these in, but you can just slide them in along the side. That's why they're there. See how they're kind of a little bit raised? If they're just resting on things, it's not actually too bad. So I may try it out like that. And finally, your little odds and ends, which I wish fit here. I think they could if you really fiddled with it. I was fiddling with it for a while, but I inevitably ended with that. And finally, the rule book goes right on top. So that's the first box. And then all the second box is minis. That's it. I'll show you. It's really quick. We have the much smaller box. You'll see there's a tiny, tiny bit of lid lift on this as I smush it down to try to hide the fact because I've just put in a few extra tiles than are actually supposed to hold it. So we've got all the rule books, and these rule books just have the additional scenarios. And so I figure if I'm playing these additional scenarios, I'll play with this box. And then you have the additional map tiles that correspond with those additional scenarios, and the Rainbow Land and the Gumdrop Forest and the Gumdrop Desert, I'm pretty sure. And in here, you literally have, this came with it. I said I'm not mussing around with it. You could make this so much more efficient, but I don't need to because I put as much stuff that I wanted in there. The thing about having all the mob cards is you don't get these extra fluffy auras. So these just add additional abilities and additional rewards to a specific monster. And so they're here. For now, I may swap out some mobs with them to put them into the main deck as well, because I think that's a fun little extra mechanic. But again, it's not something that I'm going to be playing with for a long time until I get used to the game. There are these extra campaign cards that came with it that I have no idea if they are relevant or not, if I can use them without having additional content. So they're in here for now. And then up top here, these could go into the main box and likely will. I have the special tokens for these special scenarios because why not have them in the same spot as the scenario tiles? You're going to be playing them, and then they couldn't fit into my token slot anyway because I kind of forgot about them when I was making them. And then over here we have big old fluffy boy. And he technically could fit and was fitting into the main box as well, but I found it was a little bit too cramped and I wanted to make sure there was that space, and so I took him out. And then you have these two gigantic minis that I figured, you know what? If we're playing with these gigantic roaming monsters and we want to play with them because they're like bosses, we know we're going to play with that specific scenario. I can just take them out here. And so they fit quite well, but you'll see I did chop this insert a bit so that there was a little bit of space here so that Buddy Boy's wing could fit under there. All nice. But you see, there's so much extra space that I'm leaving, and I'm doing that because these are the larger monsters and they're a bit wider, and yeah, I'll be happy to play with them and paint them, but I'm not going to need them for every single game. And so likely, if I'm taking this to someone's house, as I tend to do, and see that's easy to just slide in like that, I'm not gonna bring them, because I might bring another option instead. Although our first round of this did take us like 4 hours, so chances are maybe that's the only game you're playing on game night if you're playing Massive Darkness. And see, there's no like major storage solution here, and I don't mind that there isn't, because it does exactly what I need it to do, which is to house the overflow, the main pièce de résistance, which I've never said in such a horrendous accent before, is the other box and how that's created. This just holds the overflow, and you could easily put in foam core and make it a bit nicer, but I don't care to spend that time because I spent too much time on the other one already. So that's it. Geez, that was on your end, not mine, I swear. That's Massive Darkness 2. That's my insert solution. Now, this is a bit of a cheat. Not really. But what I have in here, sorry, I'm only using one hand because having one hand above my body helps with the interference. What I have in here is a ton more monsters and a ton more cards. But the thing about these is that these are all for the Heavenfall campaign. It gets you to levels 6 to 10, and I don't own the Heavenfall campaign yet. And I figure if I do end up purchasing the Heavenfall campaign, then I can incorporate these into that specific box, because you're only going to play with these when you play that specific mode. So I feel like you can afford to keep these. I'm going to keep these just a little bit separate, just so I have it. I'm not going to throw it out or anything. But that's my cheat. These levels 6 to 7 are not currently fitting into that solution. And honestly, if you wanted to put them in there, you'd have to make some more sacrifices. Likely you'd just reduce the number of roaming monster sculpts that you would have in there and just extend it out that way and make that a smaller section. But that's not something that I want to do, and I have no need to include these into the main game. And if I ever want to play a game on like super hard mode, then I also have those. So that's it. I hope the feedback wasn't too extraordinarily annoying. I hope that this gave you ideas for your own solutions as well, your own inserts, and I hope this was helpful. If you got Massive Darkness and you pulled it out once and were like, oh my god, I'm never pulling this out again, even though I'm enjoying it, because that's definitely what I did. I said, I do not know how I'm going to incorporate all of this stuff. I just play with the base box, and I was like, I'm never touching these expansions, which is a shame because I spent more money getting them from Kickstarter than I would have just getting the base game in the box. But I'm pretty happy with how this turned out, and hope that was helpful, or hope you just enjoyed hanging out with me as you had me on in the background, in which case that's pretty cool too. Have a great rest of your day. My name's Chris George, and I don't have a catchphrase, but I will see you in the next video.